Okay, so for the last week, we're going to try and get population pyramids completely finished and do a couple of questions from the exam papers so that you're able for your test in this whenever that might happen. Right, so today we're going to take a look at the different types of population pyramids and how that different types can tell us different things about economic development. And we have kind of had a bit of an introduction to this because we talked about how they can tell us about birth rates and death rates. So you're going to need to take down some notes, and you are also going to need to do an assignment afterwards. All right, so economic development on population pyramids. What that means is can we tell if a country is more or less economically developed by looking at their population pyramids? And the answer to that is we can. And we can do that by looking at these different factors. So a more developed country versus a less developed country. So in more developed countries, and you know this from the demographic transition model, there are lower birth rates. So less kids are being born because they're seen as being an economic burden. They cost more money because women stay in education longer and they have careers, so they have less kids. Compared to in less developed societies where they have more kids because they need those kids to help out around the house, they need the kids to look after them into old age, so they're seen as being an economic asset. And also because quite a lot of the kids die, they have more kids to make sure that there is enough to help around the house. Death rates then in a more developed society, there will be lower death rates, so less people are dying because they have access to better medical care, they have access to more food, whereas in a less developed society there's higher death rates because they might not have access to clean water or proper sanitation or to doctors or medication. Finally then, life expectancy. So in a more developed economy there's longer life expectancy. People live to an older age. This is again because they have access to better healthcare. There's screening programs, there's easier access to antibiotics and to vaccinations. In less developed countries, the opposite is true. People tend to die at a younger age because they don't have access to the same healthcare that richer countries do. Okay, so all of this we've talked about before. How is this reflected in population pyramids? Well, if we look at the population pyramid of a more developed economy, you can see that the lower death rates are in the narrow base, that the lower birth rates, I should have said, are in the narrow base because there's less people in the younger age categories. The lower death rates can be seen because the sides of the pyramid are relatively straight, okay? So they don't shrink as they go up. So that means that each age category isn't losing a huge amount of people into the next one. And also the longer life expectancy can be seen in the top. So here we can see a significant proportion of the population live till over the age of 70. In fact, here there's more people in the 80 plus category than there is into 0 to 5 or 0 5 to 9 age category. And then if we look at the population pyramid for a less developed country, it's always the traditional pyramid shape. So the higher birth rates are seen in a much wider base, the higher death rates because it narrows quickly all the way up, and the lower life expectancy in a very narrow top. So very, very few people in the 80 plus category compared to the younger age categories. So at a glance, population pyramids can tell you if an economy or society or a country is more developed, less developed, or even quickly developed. So you need to take this down, and just for the bottom bit there, I just want you to draw the kind of general shape of the pyramid. I don't want you to put in all the age categories. So just draw the general shape that goes with each, all right? This then brings us on to 3 different types of population pyramids. And this is based on the shape of them. So this also tells us about the economic development. So here, the first type is called the expansive. So that's, again, this traditional pyramid shape. And this is usually associated with slowly developing or less developed countries. So this is used to describe populations that are young and are growing. So because there's high birth rates, there's a lot of people in the younger age categories, and this population is growing rapidly because of that. It looks like a typical pyramid shape with a broad base and a narrow top. It's called expansive because the population is expanding. The second type then is called constrictive, and this is used to describe populations that are becoming old and shrinking. So they're constricting. This is usually associated with rapidly developing countries, so countries that are becoming developed very quickly, and they often have this beehive shape, and that's how you recognize them. And then finally, the stationary type of pyramid is used to describe populations that aren't growing at all, so they're staying stationary. There's equal percentages across the age groups, so the same amount of people are being born as are dying, and a lot of people are living into old age, and these are usually associated with developed countries. All right, so you also need to take this down as well. You need to, and if you take it down in the table, that's the most important way, and again, just get the general outline of each of the pyramid shapes. Okay, last thing you're going to do is attempt an activity on this, and this activity is in your book on page 331 and 332. So these population pyramids are in your book on page 331, and the actual question is in your book on page 332. I've just added one more category onto it, so I want you to use this, and I will be putting this up onto assignments. Right, so explain the differences between the population pyramids of both countries under the following headings: birth rate, death rate, and life expectancy. So when you're answering this question, you use those as headings, and I'll have those as separate headings in the assignment. All right, how do you answer it? That's on the next page. So obviously you have to use the population pyramid to get evidence from it. So under the heading of birth rate, you need to compare the base of the pyramids. So that means, sorry if I just top back here, the Pyramid of Ireland has a narrow base compared to the Pyramid of Sierra Leone. Okay, that's obvious, much narrower base than Sierra Leone. So this would mean that the birth rate in Ireland is a lot lower than the birth rate in Sierra Leone. Why is this? This is because Ireland is a developed country based on the shape, and Sierra Leone is less developed. Okay, so if we go back here, so under the heading of birth rate, compare the base. State if there's high or low birth rates. In that case here, Ireland would have low birth rates and Sierra Leone would have high birth rates. Explain then why they are different. This part here is based on their economic development. So you need to explain, why does Ireland as a developed country have low birth rates, and why does Sierra Leone as a less developed country have high birth rates. Okay, and you'll find a lot of that information in your notes on the demographic transition model. Secondly, then you have to look at birth rates. So you need to examine the pyramids from the base to the top. So in this bit here, we're saying that the pyramid in Ireland doesn't change all that much from the base to the top. It stays quite stationary, and then it narrows gradually. Whereas the Pyramid of Sierra Leone narrows rapidly from the base to the top. Okay, and this indicates in Ireland that there's a low death rate, but in Sierra Leone there's a high death rate. Okay, I'm partially just answering all this question for you now, so I'm not going to do any more. So then you need to explain, why is there a low birth or a low death rate in Ireland and a high death rate in Sierra Leone? And finally, the life expectancy part, you need to compare the top of the pyramids, and you need to state if there's a long life expectancy or a lower life expectancy in each of the countries. Then you need to explain why they're different. And just for this one here, try to give different explanations that you've given for death rate. So in this case here, the explanations might be to do with more like preventative medicines, like we can screen, like we've access to antibiotics, etc. Whereas here the death rate is more to do with what they don't have in developing countries, maybe clean water or sanitation. Okay, so this will go up as an assignment, and I want you to give that a go. It should be there should be relatively long answers, and each of your headings should address each of these. If you're not sure how to do it or you're stuck, just get in touch.